Okay, great. Okay, I think we are about ready to start. Am I right, Sada?
Yes, yes. We are 5:30 now here.
All right. So, once again, thank you to everybody for joining in our webinar series. We started this what looks like a very long time ago, but our objective was to focus on the GCM objectives, the 23 objectives, and come to a greater understanding of what these three objectives are and what they mean to the different stakeholders that would be involved in its implementation. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining in. It has been a pleasure journeying with you in this series. We are today focusing on GCM Objective 18, which focuses on skills, and we have a panel that has looked at this issue from different perspectives and engaged in it in a very real way. And so I'm glad that and I will introduce them as I call upon each one of them to give their views. As usual, the chat box is open for you to put in any comments, questions that you might have. I will ask each of the resource persons. We have kept the series very interactive, or as far as possible very interactive. And so not long drawn answers, very short answers, but so that we get more input and more back and forth between us and the floor. And at a different time, I will even ask the floor to take on um, to come on with some questions that they might have. So let us start GCM Objective 18 and this discussion on skills. And as we begin, I would like you and all of us in the room, and particularly the panelists, let us uh, let us take a step back and ask ourselves how this whole discussion on skills has become so big. It's a major discourse today in migration discourse, the skills discourse. Everybody is talking about skills. Recruiters are talking about skills. Countries of origin are talking about skills. Countries of destination are talking about skills. UN institutions are talking about skills. So skills, 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 skills. That is the new mantra today in migration discourse. And I would like to ask ourselves today some very pertinent, reflective questions. And I hope you will have a chance to share your own reflection on on this conversation in the course of our webinar today. Is the skills discourse an indictment on the mobility of the poor? I'm asking this because when we start looking at the skills discussion, what is driving this? Is it just the notion of better skills means higher productivity, or is there something more? Do we need to deconstruct it more and deconstruct it from the perspective of the poor or the low skilled, what is called low skilled workers? Do we need to look at it from their perspective and start beginning to see what this means? you know so for examples, let us ask ourselves, if we go on this bandwagon of skills, would this mean decent work for migrant workers? Can any of us guarantee that this would mean decent work for migrant workers? Would this mean and when I'm saying decent work, what am I saying? Would this mean that migrant workers, therefore, because of their skills, now have the right to join trade unions? Will that be a necessary outcome of the skills discourse? Would this mean migrant workers will now be able to navigate the justice system and they'll have justice served kind of thing to them now that they are empowered with new skills? Would this means that the jobs that migrants will take on will no longer only be the jobs that locals are not interested in taking, that these are not the low end of the jobs that locals have no interest in taking in and that migrants fill up? Would this mean that? Would this mean rights irrespective of status? Would skills mean bring all that? Would skill bring all that? Or is this a typical managed migration response where flows of migrant workers needs to be solved as a problem. That because of the so called flows of migrant workers, one way to curtail these flows is to let through those who have skills. Who determines the skills? Who determines the skills? And what happens to those who must move because they have no other choice to move? Shouldn't we be asking the fundamental question, why in this age are there so many poor who do not have the opportunity to to an education which will give them the skills that are required? Why aren't we asking the question of why don't we have the skills that can help our own, can be used, absorbed in our country of origin? Why aren't we asking those questions? What is wrong with the development agenda today when we relegate the poor further down the pyramid of inequality? When I'm saying this, because I'm saying the more we talk about skills and the more we make it sound as is this is what will change migration flows, this is what will empower migrants, this is what will bring decent work and things like that, we must recognize in many countries of origin the opportunity for skills is not fully there. The absorption of skills is not there. And the recognition of skills in countries of destination is not there. So when we make skills such a big phenomena in migration discourse, we also need to deconstruct it is in whose interest is this? As countries of destination and countries of origin talk about skills, should they also discuss of unconditional development cooperation that focuses on the poorest of the poor, those who don't have the opportunities that we are talking about? What about skills recognition? What about underskilling that is so prevalent in many destination countries? We hear so many of these stories of doctors becoming nurses, of engineers becoming technicians, of teachers becoming taxi drivers. We hear so much of this. So is there really a skills deficit? What about skill certification? There are migrant workers who have gone to a country of destination and have spent 15 years in that country of destination. And yet, when they return, they come back as if they went from that and have not learned anything, not developed in any way. And they come back with that same level of skill engagement back in the country of origin. And they cannot be absorbed in the labor market at a higher level. What about skills development? Countries of destination so dependent on migrant workers, shouldn't they be giving them an opportunity for higher learning, education, and things like that? Isn't there that dimension to it, that opportunity that migrants workers should be allowed to avail of? Wouldn't that be the normal story in human development and skilling if we were sincere about it? What about skills integration? When countries offer returning migrant workers, all the support that you can give them is to open a grocery store, or to hire or buy a taxi and run a taxi, when they have built nations, when they have contributed to the development of the first world, of developing countries, or of countries that are in a higher stage of development than their own. Shouldn't we think about of how to integrate them better? So let's look at the skills discourse more critically. Is it a discourse that is really in the interest of migrant workers? And then how? Particularly, let us ask ourselves, is this really going to change in the hierarchy of work and in the structure of work? I think this is important for us because we can very easily buy into this discourse. The problem is that it takes a few somewhere at the top to say this is going to be the winning formula. And then everybody runs to that because this is the winning formula. What will it cost the migrant? What will it mean to the migrant? This is something, and it's not simply from a rational perspective. Of course, yes, we can say skills, and everybody of us who is in this conference room, in this webinar today, is schooled enough to know that skills, education, training gives us opportunities, and we have availed of those opportunities. So yes, it looks like this is the winning formula, but look at it from the perspective of somebody who has not had the opportunities we have had, and therefore who has chosen to migrate in the hope of an opportunity. How will our mantra on skills, how will that change what is needed to change for those in the so-called low skill, low wage category? So I would like today, in today's discussion, when we discuss, let us not jump on the bandwagon of skills. Let that be to the UN institutions, to governments, and government parlays. But for us that are involved on the ground and on issues with migrant workers, let us see how real this discourse is, and how much have we seen, and we seen in the sense of how much has this changed, and how much is this the change momentum that we are looking for migrant workers in advocating for their rights and dignity. Having said that, then I will now go to our panel. We've got a very good panel today that has a long experience in looking at these issues and in working on these issues. I will start with Ronnie Pradhan, and Ronnie is from the SAMI project, a Helvetas of a Swiss organization, the Swiss Intercooperation with Nepal, and Helvetas has been involved quite a bit under the SAMI project in development of skills. And in the case of Nepal, there has been even investment by giving private sector some of the role to play in development of skills for Nepali migrant workers as they prepare to go out for overseas employment. So Ronnie, let me start with you then. When you talk about skills, and as you get involved in these programs on skills development, how confident are you that this is leading to a transformation for Nepali migrant workers overseas? How has it been meant decent work for migrant workers overseas, Nepali migrant workers overseas? Ronnie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, William. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, Ronnie, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, William, for the question and for this opportunity. Regarding Nepali context, Nepal is known as a labor-sending country and is known for low-skilled workers. Nepali workers, they are known as no-skilled workers, low-skilled workers. In this context, skills training, pre-departure skills training plays a very important role in the decent work and in empowering migrant workers departing from Nepal with skills training. So it has been useful for migrants, and it is very challenging that you are saying just now skills in everywhere in migration discourse. But when we work with migrant workers, when we work with potential migrant workers, that is not the scenario. They are not interested in skills training because they think that investing time, energy in skills, they will earn more by going early there. Investing a 1 month in skills training, they think as waste of time, and they want to migrate as soon as they have passport in their hand. So the discourse of migration and skills has to be taken at the ground level, where the project I am working has a lot of experience on awareing migrant workers in terms of skills training, and it has direct linkages with the decent work scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie, and I know that you are saying this. It has meant empowerment. Can you explain to me, or can you explain as to how this has led in the country of destination? Does this mean that Nepali migrant workers in a country of destination feel that this has given them, this has led to their empowerment in their negotiations, for example, with their employers, in some of the other elements of decent work? Does it help them to demand those elements of decent work?
Yes, William, what we have experienced is that, while they come to skills training, which is free of cost, and they enroll in the training program, and they where they meet, in the skills training institute, there are private companies, recruitment agencies, employers coming for the interviews, and they have a negotiation about the salary, about the work and working conditions, and which help migrant workers to get linked with the recruitment and employers, and go for the better work as they have thought for.
Okay, I will ask you again, just to, I'm gonna, and thank you for that, and I agree that once they have the skills, they've got some kind of certificate, and they go to the employers and they say that this is what we have. But do you feel it has already become like a market already, in the sense of recruiters are doing skills training, the government is doing skills training, different private institutions are doing skill training, so it's like become a whole market out there, even for skills training, and migrant workers go shopping around to different institutions looking for, okay, where we can get a certificate, and all these certificates. So it's a collection of certificates kind of thing to be able to. So has this gone a bit too far, in that sense, in terms of creating a need for a market for this skill certification programs?
Um, William, yes, private sector, there is lots of private sectors, involved in providing skills training and skills certificate. And yes, which has helped migrants to get the better skills and also skills certificate.
All right. Let me come back to you then. I'll come back to you and I'll ask you, Runege. Uh, and we know Runege for a long time. He was with the SLBFE. He's now retired, but he has been a key government official from the government of Sri Lanka, and played a key role in looking at SLBFE, the Sri Lanka Foreign Bureau of Foreign Employment, in looking at bilateral agreements and looking at regional processes, and even looking at training of missions and negotiations as well with in terms of with countries of destination. And again, in terms of the bilateral agreements and the Abu Dhabi dialogue and Colombo process and all these processes that you have been engaged in, and it was, at least I'm sure it is in your time, because the skills discourse is very new in some ways, in migration discourse around, let us say, in the last 10 years or something like that or less, it has become so big, and you were very much involved in the SLBFE around this time. How have you seen governments of countries of origin and governments of destination uh, mo- uh, working on this skills agenda, negotiating on this skills agenda? Runage, your mic is off. Unmute your mic, please.
First of all, I must thank you for conducting this series of seminars, and also you are posting some Facebook comments and different type of you take issues and developments at the time of at this difficult time, experience all of us. So for that, I must first thank you and your team for elaborating and keeping us alive on the subject of migration during this difficult time. So when I come to the subject of this today's forum, yes, the bilateral instrument and the RCPs are considered as a key sources of developing mutual interest and mutual cooperation with regard to skill development and skill recognition of migrant workers from sending and receiving countries perspective. So the first, we talk about this bilateral agreement, we know, we had conducted a survey in 2015 with the ILO, a regional based survey where we covered all major three regions, that is Europe, Africa and Asia. The Asia region was covered by myself. So where we found about 151 practical MOUs, traceable MOUs and BLAs. Unfortunately, out of which very few have mentioned about concerns on this skill recognition or skill certification. So in my region, that is Asia, I have inspected about, examined about 60, nearly 60 MOUs and BLAs, where only 7 were involved with in some provisions with regard to skill upgrade, no skill recognition. So, therefore, when it is a very sorry state, and because when we negotiate for MOUs or the BLAs, the negotiating parties should concentrate on this very important aspect. That is the, normally they think about the welfare and the protection aspect when they draw these MOUs or the BLAs, but the subjects like enhancing this kind of skills and also recognizing their skills and certifying their skills like that. This kind of aspects also to be considered when we, negotiate for different type of MOUs or BLAs with sending and receiving countries. So there are some actually very constructive BLS and MOs with regard to this aspect also, the training aspect also, or the skill aspect also. We can quote the one that Sri Lanka entered into with Italy. So that agreement provides kind of a base for mutual understanding about training improvement and training facilities and what type of training that the migrant worker should have when the person migrates to Italy. So there was a joint collaboration. They authorized some centers in Sri Lanka. Their trainers came here, and under this MOU agreement, they authorized some centers here to uplift and try to get their knowledge in Italian language and other environmental things where they are going to work. So likewise, even the Korean MOU, even we can see that one also kind of improved document in this respect, because the Korean MOU regarding this employment permit system, they also talk about language skill, and even they conduct a kind of a test before the person is selected for the job. So this kind of mechanism should be enlarged, encouraged, and enhanced when we negotiate for bilateral agreement or MOUs. When we talk about this RPS, regional processes, we can see a lot of development with regard to acceptance of GCM concerns by these RCPs in recent meetings, especially the Colombo process meeting, where they have even recognized as a key thematic area of there are 5 thematic areas, that the skills recognition and skills certification. So in that respect, they work very hard, and even Sri Lanka government introduced several schemes, programs with regard to that aspect. And we can even recall the meeting in 2018, the CP membership countries conducted in Bangkok, where they have clearly indicated, accepted the importance of GCM concerns, especially this training, the skill aspect also, to be incorporated in their policies in the countries of destination and countries of origin. So accordingly, Sri Lanka has different modules introduced in recent past to recognize these concerns of GCM and also to go for SDG targets also, which covers this aspect also. So where we have the kind of a linkage with the country's national authority, that is vocational training authority, for certification of these return migrants, and also including a condition that all migrants should obtain a kind of certificate, even the housemaid or a domestic worker, kind of a certificate of their particular skills from this national authority for migration. So this aspect also incorporated with the system of SLBFE in recent past. Unless this certification, even a migrant domestic worker can't migrate for foreign employment. So these type of developments are there. So I think, further elaboration can be made during the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronagay, for this, and I agree with you in the sense of that. Yes, the Sri Lankan government has been involved in a lot of the kind of skilling, and the need, as you have said, it has been taken up in the bilateral discussions and even in the RCPs. Let me ask you then: has the fact that Sri Lankan workers have been able to get these kind of certifications, for example, domestic workers have been able to get some kind of skill certification that these are the skills they have, has this led to, therefore, the domestic workers getting a higher wage? For example, has the Sri Lankan government been able to get a higher wage for Sri Lankan domestic workers, or is there a kind of mean wage for Sri Lankan workers, domestic workers, established by the Sri Lankan government?
Yes, to some extent, the wage, of course, I can't say immediately the wages are paid much more than the other persons, but the thing is, the acceptance, the recognition is there. When the demand is there, then so the foreign employers, foreign recruiters know that the Sri Lankan domestic worker has kind of a skill before migrate to their countries. So that concern, that respect is there for, increase in the demand. So also when the demand is there, automatically the wages are going up. So, and also the thing is, by giving this kind of a training or the pre-migration skill development, so the worker also, the workers are empowered to face whatever the difficulties at that time, and they are educated enough to face challenges at that time. This kind of training is not meant only for increasing wages, but for minimizing different type of harassment, different type of exploitations, as well as, their status, upgrading their status in these countries.
Uh, thank you for that, and again, and I agree with you that the skills, and from a kind of economic perspective, even to say that yes, if there are skills that will increase in demand, that increase in demand will lead to increase in wage, negotiation for wage, and also aside from wage, it will also be able to uh, give the migrant worker, empower the migrant worker to address other dimensions of her life in terms of her rights. uh,
Correct.
and it would be very, very interesting to see, therefore, that why, or at least I will ask you to ponder. I will move on to the next panel and then ask you to ponder, therefore, is do we then actually get, because of skills, do we actually get that required kind of the ability to negotiate a wage? Is that really happening across the board with Sri Lankan domestic workers, or are again, or is it with Sri Lankans, with Indians, with Nepalis, with Filipinos? There is a mean wage, and the skills, yes, we could get a certification for it, but does that doesn't really make a difference because a mean wage has been established already. So what then does the certificate really help in, or the skill certificate help in?
Yes, William, we have experience. I mean, offering higher wages for this kind of skill certified housemates, also domestic workers also. Because some countries, some employers require this kind of training. I mean, they have put a precondition that the domestic worker must bear kind of a certification before migration. So then they are categorized. They are categorized non-trained or non or the low skilled worker. Even the, I mean, my position is even a low. There is even a low category of worker has kind of skill. When a domestic worker has a kind of a skill that to be improved for migration or the foreign employment. So we can't accept all diplomas and degrees from this low category of workers, but they are also should be empowered to obtain kind of a certification from a recognized institution like this Sri Lanka Vocational Training Authority, which offered NVQ, that is National Vocational Qualification grade, or the standard 4 for domestic workers, like that 1 to 4. I mean, they have kind of a criteria of assessing their level of skill. So, I mean, there are employers, as you mentioned, demanding the workers of this skill, improved workers or certified workers for their employment. So, for them, they are offering special allowances or special kind of a wage instead of other general housemates or the domestic workers. There are experience like that, we know.
And that's true. And thank you again. And I'll move on to the next speaker, next panelist. But I agree with you. I think, and that is why I'm saying I think we need to look at this largely because there are now countries of destination requiring that upon entry there should be some kind of skills certification. Uh, and because of that, and I put this question to Ronnie as well, because of that, in the countries of origin, there is a whole market developing in terms of preparing migrants for skills, both private sector, recruiters, government, and things like that. And the migrant workers have to go through the process of acquiring all these kind of certificates before they can actually be deployed. Question will always be, after acquiring all this, does the deployment mean decent work? That is going to be the big question. Let me in the let me especially, and I'm saying, does it mean decent work, particularly and especially in the context where migrants are seen as taking the work in the low wage sector or low skill sector, as is being currently determined in some countries of destination. But let me go on to Raquel. And Raquel is from PASEI, the Philippine Association of Service Providers, and she is the president of PASEI. Now, PASEI is, for those of us who are on this, it's, I think, one of the largest, correct me if I'm wrong, Raquel, it's one of the largest or the
Yes.
largest network of recruiters in the Philippines. And PASEI has played a key role in determining uh, the regulation of Philippine, what goes into the regulation of overseas Filipino workers. PASEI is also working very closely with TESDA when new skills are needed, constantly looking at how to get involved in skill development training for Filipino migrants, so that Filipino migrants can continue to maintain a high and world-class standard wherever they are in the world of work. Raquel, as 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 somebody in the, and I'm sure you have seen this change yourself as a recruiter, is that maybe, let's say, about 15, 20 years ago, there was not such an emphasis on skills. But this skills discourse, which has kind of picked up now, so there is everybody is now, like I said, engaged in some format or the other in skills, in skill development, including recruiters. And we also know, and we have heard reports of where sometimes these, whether how robust these still training programs are is also sometimes questioned in when we have some situations where a migrant worker finds himself or herself in an exploitative situation. So in your case, as the recruitment industry takes this up, what is the motivation behind this taking up the skilling of migrant workers of the deployment of overseas Filipino workers? Raquel, the floor is yours.
Okay. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And thank you very much, William, for inviting us in this very important forum. Uh, well, PASEI, uh, PASEI, PASEI is ensure that the OFWs get paid, get higher payment. So we feel that investing in skills training is important in overseas recruitment. So what we did is we have a close coordination with our government through TESDA, the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. And right now, we are in the process of forging a memorandum of agreement wherein the purpose of this is to help our OFWs, especially the repatriated ones. We wanted to train them more on the reintegration part of of their skills. And also because of the pandemic, we know that we have about 400,000 who came back, and we feel that there is a need for uh, more skills to be offered by the government. And PASEI had been active in recommending policies to our government. And right now, the most changing part is the host countries require modules or trainings which is adaptable to their settings. So like PASEI right now is in coordination with Austria for their caregiving vacancies. So we are on the process of working with them on the modules for caregivers. And then for Poland, we are also working with the employers on like farming, poultry processing. And in Germany, we have simulation on the hospital setting. So we saw that the emerging practice right now is skills training should be uh, in coordination with the host country and the employers themselves, because we should be guided by what they need.
And thank you for that, Raquel. And this is what I said in the introduction as well. And I would like to again probe a little bit here. You have said working with Australia for the care industry, for Poland with agriculture and things like that. A lot of the industry, and we are looking for developing of skills within these kind of sectors in destination countries. But these are the sectors in destination countries where even locals don't necessarily want these jobs anymore, or they don't have the population to take up these jobs. So migrants have to come and fill these jobs. But because they are somewhere at the low wage sector scale in terms of they are seen as work in the informal sector or work in the low wage sector, low skill sector, uh, how does this lead to workers being seen as equal as nationals, for example, in rights and dignity? How does this lead to that?
Okay. As in the Philippines, we are very much regulated in the recruitment industry. So we have to follow on the wage set by our government. So when we negotiate, we have to negotiate the highest salary the employers can give. And our government always look at what is the minimum wage of the host country. So it should not be lower than the minimum wage of the host country. So we see to it that the salary is within that range, because if not, our government will not approve. So but then we have to have the workers have to have the skills, so that we can demand also the salary.
And thank you for that. And I think I really like what you're saying, because it's helping us to understand or probe even deeper into deconstructing, I feel, the skill discourse. Because exactly like you said, is that we have to look for what is the minimum wage in that country to ensure that we at least get the minimum. And that's what I'm saying. As long as we go for at least the minimum, does this then necessarily mean that this leads to a sense of equality with nationals in terms of rights and protection and things like that? All or will migrant workers always, or at least countries of origin like the Philippines, always be relegated to looking for those jobs in a destination country that locals will not want? But the locals don't want too many of them there, so they want them to come there, but having some kind of skill certificate to say that they can take on those jobs. But they will always be at the lowest end of that job kind of ladder. Is this what managed migration is about and the skills discourse is about?
Actually, we are not just looking on the lowest positions. That's the reason that before they leave, they should have the skills, so that when they come there, when they arrive at their country of destinations and in their works, they can be promoted when as the months goes by, or as the years goes by. So they should have the skills that the employer needs.
Okay, thanks for that. And I will now go to let me come, I'll come back to you on this. And I still want to talk to you about, really, is the Philippine worker therefore a very empowered worker, or this is still a challenge? But let me go in the same context from the Philippines. Let me go to Maria Susan de la Rama, who is the Executive Director of the Certification Office of the Technical and Skills Development Authority of TESDA since 2014. Now, TESDA is the lead government agency that does the training of migrant workers. And I know that TESDA is always vigilant in trying to see what market is out there, how to develop skills for that market, and therefore, uh, and uh, I will ask Maria to, in your case, as TESDA gets involved in sourcing for markets overseas, how does TESDA see skills as the way to an empowered Filipino migrant worker? And most especially, can you give us examples of where skills has made the difference for the Filipino migrant worker? Maria, the floor is yours.
Okay, good evening, William, and good afternoon, good morning to all of the participants wherever you are. I see that my brief presentation has been shared. If we can just go through this, you have a whole lot of questions to answer. I don't think we can answer that in this one forum. It needs really a longer time, but those questions that you have posed are really, really very important and critical to this topic now on skills development. So if I may go through this presentation, who's sharing this? Can you this show this already?
We can see it. We can see it. Are you sharing it, or
I
is
am not the one.
Rakesh? Are you sharing this?
I can do it myself actually.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
So stop
Go
sharing
ahead.
first. I'll share from my end so I can easily navigate. Okay. So This will just take a little time. Okay, so I'm going to test the programs. So I'm focusing on test of programs and services for our overseas Filipino workers. That's how we call our migrant workers, investing in skills development. So that's your topic. But very briefly, TESDA, and you have already mentioned it, that we are the authority in providing relevant, accessible, high quality and efficient technical education, skills development, support of the development of high quality middle level manpower responsive to and in accordance with Philippine development goals and priorities. So we are one of the 3 education agencies in the country. We're handling and we're supervising technical education. So that's outside of basic education and higher education. So this is where the skills for our migrant workers fall, and also for all the other workers in the country as well, and most importantly for the workers in our country. So for the specific to the OFWs, we have programs for those who are already in the country of destination, and we have, and I'm putting this up first, is the TESDA on-site assessment program. So we've done this very recently, about just 6 years ago, 2014. We thought this is not possible, but this became possible due to also the directive of then the Secretary of Labor and Employment. The Secretary wanted to scale and empower our OFWs, particularly the vulnerable ones, and those are the domestic workers. So she instructed our overseas labor offices to scale them, to provide them skills during their free time. So in some countries, there are days where they can have their day off, and the secretary wanted them to be productive. So train them for skills other than what they're doing at home. And also, we came to realize that there are other organizations conducting skills training in the countries of destination. Also, there are organizations of Filipinos, that we call them the Filipino communities, organizing skills training for our workers there. So the secretary wanted to see if they are really skilled by providing assessment, and then later on be certified. And this certification will help them find other opportunities, better opportunities, or when they come back home, then they can also find other work here, other opportunities in the Philippines. But the most important thing for the secretary at that time is to make them productive even in their day off. So there we from the time that we started this, we were going there, bringing our assessors, finding assessment venues that we can use. And then we already found out, as I said, that there are training institutions providing skills. And so we are able now to accredit them. So we have our system of accrediting overseas assessment centers and even competency assessors who are also Filipinos. And then we also already now register TVET programs overseas. And these are mostly what we have accredited and registered are mostly offered also by Filipinos. So they have already organized some training programs, and they have set up their own training centers overseas. And we were supposed to do provide scholarship program for those who are there. But due to the pandemic, this was stopped. And we do also portfolio assessment. So portfolio assessment are for those who have been there for a long time already. And this is also for the workers here in the Philippines who have had the experience, and instead of conducting face-to-face assessment, then we assess them through their documents and proofs, the evidences that they have worked for the specific qualification that they will be applying for. And we have the TESDA online program. So our OFWs can enroll online for free. We have available programs that have been developed, not really for them, but a lot of them are availing it. It's for all Filipinos everywhere, even the foreigners or the people from other countries are able to avail, because you can just access this from our website and it's all free. These are MOOCs, or the Massive Open Online Courses. And then here in the Philippines, we have, for those who are returning, we have scholarship also for them, meaning they can avail of free skills development, free training, so that they can engage in other work, or be involved in other jobs. And we have also the free assessment for those who are going out of the country, and also for those who are coming back to the country. And we have that we call malasakit desks, or the care desks at airports, test offices, and institutions, ready to assist them and provide services to our OFWs. So very briefly on the on-site assessment program, this was designed to assess current knowledge and skills of OFWs in relation to the alternative qualifications in or related to alternative qualifications or jobs, assist OFWs in acquiring the Philippine National Certificate, because we found out that these national certificates, other than the domestic work. So if we are talking about domestic work, before they leave the country, they already have their national certificates, because that has been a policy of the Department of Labor and our Philippine Overseas Employment Administration way back around, I think, more than 15 years ago. And so when that was made a policy, then before domestic work can leave the country, they have to be trained and certified. And then also for those who are coming back, then they can come back already with the skills that they have acquired there through those training programs that were developed for them, not on domestic work, but on other higher level skills. So these are the countries where we've been to, in Middle East mostly, and then in Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore. And these are
Thank you.
These are the programs for the online program. So yeah. I think that's
All right. Let me quickly come to you. Let me just ask you then on the skills thing, with all the on-site training and all the kind of skills programs that you have done for migrant workers, have you done an assessment of, over the years, the exploitation of migrant workers, Filipino migrant workers, over the years has decreased, largely because of the empowerment that skills brings? Has there been a kind of study of the correlation between skills and exploitation?
well, none from us. We have not done that study, although we get some anecdotal, and just very recently, because for me personally, I think the pandemic has a silver lining to all this. Our assessment was suspended, and we know that in our assessment for domestic workers, there are those that can just leave getting the certificate from elsewhere. And so when we suspended that, and now we have very strict rules and regulations. One of the recruitment associations informed us that now that we are really very strict with our certification, then there are less and reduced complaints about the workers from the employers, coming from the employers. But that was just an anecdotal, a story or a report that was given to us verbally by the Association of Recruitment Agencies, not the PASE, another association. So, but what we are monitoring and what we are following up is what happens to them after we give them the certificate while they're there. So some of them, they come back, they were teachers here. Now they're back and they're back to teaching. So not anymore the domestic, they've left that work as domestic worker, and now they're back to teaching because the DepEd now has this TVL track, or the Tech Book and Livelihood track. So they found the use with the skills that they learned through going back to teaching. So very minimal reports, yeah. A few reports only that we get.
I think that that might be a good because I can see the big investment that the Philippines has made, and TESDA is renowned for the work it has done, pioneering work even on the on-site kind of skilling programs and things like that. So it really might be really good as a to look at what is the real correlation between abuse and exploitation of workers with regard to skilling, and over the years if you have a benchmark, and how does this come down, would be an interesting study to make. The other question I would like to ask you before I go on to the next panelist is when I with all the skills programs again that are done on site and things like that, and you have mentioned in one case domestic workers coming back and going on to do teaching here because there is a market that has opened up for teachers in the Philippines because by the Department of Education. uh, are there other instances like this of migrant workers acquiring skills abroad, recognition of those skills, and what are the studies showing, or have studies been done in showing how much of these skills earned abroad, whether through TESDA programs or whether through job kind of on-site kind of thing in a destination country? Is there any study of how much of that skill volume has been absorbed back into the Philippine market? Is there is there any indicator of that size?
No, we don't have that study, but as I said, these are just reports coming to us or stories being shared by the OFWs. There's also one who came back because he learned that in Saudi Arabia, now he's back and he's uh, also in teaching, but he's put up his own training center for fiber optics. So um, these are the kinds of stories. We have not really conducted the formal study. It would be good. That would be a good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking, yeah, I think it's so important because skills has become so big in migration discourse. Like I said, we will have to start looking at what real impact is that making, because it is costing migrants that they have to get these certificates and things like that. So what is the real impact both in country of destination and even upon the time that they return? But let me go to our final panelist first as I come in, and Salar Khan is a young activist or young academic. I have known Salar as a young volunteer in Qatar, Pakistani of Pakistani origin, who has been involved for a long time in looking at what is happening to the life of migrant workers, particularly in the low wage sector in Qatar. I know he has done some very daring work in terms of rescue of migrant workers in difficult situations. He has also got worked in a certain sense on research on the ground with on issues of migrant workers, and he has looked at financial literacy curriculum, developing some of these for migrant workers, and he has participated in several meetings of international organizations and giving his perspective as a young academic activist, very engaged on the ground with migrant workers in a destination country. And it's good. And now I know he's also actually going on to do his masters or PhD. Salar, I'm not sure what it is, in and focusing on skills again. And so it's great to have him on board. And Salar, just to ask you, you have looked at this. You have looked at low wage migrant workers. You have looked at the whole question of skills as it has emerged in this, which has led you to in your go for higher studies and craft on a work on a thesis, or at least to put together an idea for a thesis that focuses on the need for skilling for migrant workers. Can you say something more about this, on what you are seeing and why this need, and what you think is the issue on the ground? Salar.
Okay, all right. First of all, hello everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning in different parts of the world. Thank you, Mr. William, for the great introduction. So it all started with one of my interviews with one of the migrant workers that I met in Qatar, and this was his third visit to Qatar. So he came here initially for 13 years, then went back, then came back again, then went back, and then came back again. And it got me to think about that, why has it happened? One person has lived 13 to 15 years of his life initially, but they go back and they realize that they are not suited for that environment. They have not learned anything that could help them support themselves and their families back home, and it is forcing them to migrate again. So from there, I started to think about why is this happening, and it came down to, I conducted a few surveys initially, a few interviews with the workers here, and I realized that they all focus on this thing, that they don't have, number one, time to gain any new skill. They come to these countries and they work six days a week, 12 hours a day. They are busy in work, they're tired, they don't get opportunities to further improve their skills, which leads them to go back home thinking that they can sustain themselves, but due to these lack of skills, they have to go back. Now, as in my introduction, it also says that I am now working in the field of progressive education, and progressive education focuses on lifelong learning. So it doesn't have to be specific skills, but it also includes financial literacy. And everybody who is talking here in the panel, they've provided a great insight on what is happening on the departing countries, the people where the migrants from where they're departing from. And here in my thesis, what I'm planning to focus on is to identify the areas which can truly help the migrants in sustaining themselves back home. So as Testa in Philippines is doing something at a national scale, the research that I've conducted, I've identified that there's no national scale skill development for migrant workers in the host countries, and I think that is worrisome, because they are still treating migrant workers as someone who's going to come, do the work, and go back and try to figure out the life on their own. So the areas that I've identified at the moment is the number one, financial literacy. It's a skill that might not help the migrant workers in getting jobs, but it might help them in making better decisions in life, so they don't have to migrate back and forth, and they're economically sustainable once they go back home. The second skill, which is also part of the 21st century skills and is repeatedly mentioned in the SDGs, the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals of decent work and better opportunities, is number one, access to ICT education, which is part of the 21st century skills. And in Qatar, it is not being done at national scale, but organizations such as Reach Out to Asia, they have this program called Better Connections program, where they use the train the trainer model to teach or to train the workers in ICT skills. ICT is something that is being identified as the future of everything. So people who are equipped with ICT and the use of computers and proper knowledge, that is something that they're focusing on. And actually today I was reading a research where it said, where it was focusing on domestic workers and how ICT has helped them connect with their families, and also how ICT has helped them make decisions on whether these domestic workers should go back home or they should stay at the workplace in a foreign country. So it is really having a strong impact on the workers overall and the welfare of the workers. Then another area that we identified was literacy and numeracy. A lot of workers that I've interacted with, they lack basic literacy and numeracy skills, which is also being identified as one of the skills of the future, skills to communicate, which is part of the 21st century skills, which in the job market is going to help the migrants overall. And the last area that I was planning to explore was, it's a difficult one, is how to identify legal knowledge as a skill. So the migrants who are coming to the host country, to what extent should they have the knowledge to make sure that they are not exploited in any way? So this is the overall theme that I've been working on. It is a multidisciplinary work that's happening relating education to migrants and their skill set and which skill sets to focus on. So this is the idea, and this is how I'm seeing things at the moment.
Thank you, Salar, for that, and thank you for sharing of your own experience of what triggered it and how you got there. And I like some of the ideas. You were a little choppy because of the signal, but I like some of the ideas that I've heard coming across. One is this whole notion of lifelong learning, kind of this process, and the different kind of skills that are needed. And I think this is so important what you have said, because we think of skills as a static thing, as a certificate that needs to be there. And you have said things like literacy learning, legal learning. These are things that are part of the whole learning process, kind of thing. And how does that happen? So I like that. And in your own, and therefore, when you talk about this, and as you see this whole notion of skills becoming so big, as you pursue your own working with migrant workers and talking to migrant workers, what is, you shared already that they've said they have no time for this. They they are so engrossed in their work and things like that, that their own development sometimes is not there. So one of the big areas would be skills kind of certification. What hope do you see in countries of destination like Qatar for real recognition of skills, and just not a platitude certificate saying that this person is now a four, but what kind of a real certification could be given, which would then allow for upward mobility within the Qatar market or any market within the region?
Okay, so this is my personal opinion, not based on any research, but if you just Google about learning a skill, you'll find so many different kinds of certification. And one of the things that we are trying to identify right now in our research is that whether these certificates mean anything. And would these certificates is just a piece of paper, or would it lead for a better job opportunities for the workers within the country or something outside? Uh, with the idea of this open labor market within Qatar and being able to switch companies with ease with the new law that came in, I think these certificates are going to have an impact, and it will give the workers the opportunity, or the migrants the opportunity, to improve their financial and economic status overall. Now, when it comes to the accreditation of these certification, I'm skeptical of what these certificates really mean. Is it something that another part of? Sorry, I'll take a step back. The first thing to recognize is that whether the learning the migrant is going through, what's the motivation behind it? Is it someone forcing him or her to do that? Is it something that's intrinsically the migrant is motivated for? And these, in educational perspective, all of these things have an impact on what the output would be like. When something, if you're talking about something at a national scale implemented by the government, obviously it would have better value than something being done at a private sector. Um, there are companies such as Supreme Committee of Delivery and Legacy, which is in charge of the World Cup 2022. They have started to focus on skill development of the workers that are working on the construction of the stadiums. And one of the reasons that they're doing it, so the once the stadiums are built and these workers go back home, they have something to show that this is something that we've learned other than the construction. Now we know how to operate computers. Now we know how to use an Excel sheet or Microsoft Word. And these are simple things which are going to help them hopefully secure jobs once they return home. So hopefully I've answered your question somehow.
Thank you for that, Salar. Thank you for that. And that's what I mean. I think, and I asked Maria from TESDA a little while ago as well, to say how can we ensure that some of this what is learned in skills is somewhere, what are the studies showing that these skills have been appropriated or have been useful upon return in countries of origin. I see the chat box has been very active, and so I will come now move to the chat people in the chat box and to see what are you hearing in this conversation. And I'll ask you, Richard Obedi first. I see also Lakshman in the room from a trade union. I'd really like to hone in on this question largely. Or does skill has or does us beating on this bandwagon of skill, does it really, and how much does it translate into empowerment of migrant workers, equality with nationals in the world of work, recognition of skills and mobility, and therefore the possibility even to negotiate wages. I want to know if skills makes all that difference. Let me start with you, Richard, because you were the first one to make a comment in the chat box. What are you thinking at this moment, Richard? Richard, you there? Go ahead, Richard. You want to say something? Unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Okay. Yes, I was saying I was intrigued by your opening remarks in terms of labor. Just this morning, okay, I run an organization in Uganda, and we've just secured a contract in South Sudan. I'm a Ugandan myself. We are supposed to deploy 3 Ugandan citizens as expatriates in South Sudan. But when I saw I saw a post by one of the colleagues. He's a young man, but he's in government. I was a bit perturbed. I said, okay, fine, if this is what the labor law says in the country, but also the skills that we need, because the program that we want to take the country on, it's on tobacco control, the area of public health and taxation. Fine, we are not saying they, as a country, they don't have those skills, but we would love to deploy Ugandans to work as expatriate in South Sudan. And that resonated well with your opening remarks. That's why I posted that question. Can maybe any of the panelists help us? Because the 3 people that we are going to employ in South Sudan, they will be migrants. But then this is where the country law is, and we shall hit a dead end, or we shall be at crossroad with the country's law. What should we now do? But the program is supposed to start in South Sudan, not in Uganda. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You're saying that the country law is that it does not require the skills, or it does require the skills? What is the country law that is contention?
They require the skills. They require the skills, but I think they said we should only employ expatriate or Ugandans after failing to search South Sudanese who are qualified, whether in terms of skills. We should first search the local expertise before we bring in the new expertise. I mean the external expertise.
And that is a good point that you have made, because in a lot of countries of destination, that is the law. That okay, look for the local expertise, and if you find that local expertise is not there, it is then that you can bring in foreign labor. And so countries, recruiters and governments and companies that are bringing in foreign labor always have this challenge, ultimately, of course, it is a question of what kind of a market and how strong is the market or that demand for the foreign labor in that country. But this is something that recruiters and countries of origin and destination have, despite the law, managed to get around when they want when they see the need for particular labor. But let me let me move on to another panelist. And if anybody has answers to Richard's question, please either raise your hand and I can ask you to respond to his question or put it in the chat box. Let me go to a trade union perspective on what I'm asking. Does skill lead to decent job? Is that the deficit? Does it close the gap between the decent job? Lakshman Basnath, I see you are on this call and you are with SATUC, the South Asian Region Trade Union Council. Can you say something on this, Lakshman?
Yes, yeah. I mean, as I heard you mentioning about Nepal, I mean, the skill development, and there is a big push in Nepal. Like I see a Sami representative, Roni. I mean, there's a lot of skills are going on, training certifications and all those things. But our skills are not recognized, and there is a discussion through ILO a few years ago that harmonizations of skills. And today also in my office, we are talking about standardization of skills in South Asia. We are in the similar condition. And Nepalese are the lowest paid worker in the GCC countries because of their skill. And they are the ones who are mostly put into the wrong box most of the time because of the skills and awareness. So it's not the skill alone, but it has to be a financial education, legal education, and as well as awareness. Sometimes they don't even know where they are going and which country they are going, what for they are going, what kind of job is this, and can't study the. So it needs skill, with skills. So there's a lot of backup so that he or she becomes more aware and how to get a better opportunity in the GCC countries. But I have seen some of them, from my union, hotel workers gone to GCC countries, and they have worked in very high sophisticated hotels. And now when they come back here, they have from the menial job, they have become into management services. So that is, I have seen it. So this is, skill is a must, but skill has to be substantiated with the information like the Pakistani gentleman Salar said. A lot of educational background, a holistic approach has to be taken. This is what I feel. Thank you very much, William, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. So yes, and I think that is what I think is I am trying to drive at. The contention is that we've all jumped on the mantra of skills, but is that it? Or is there more to it? And yes, Salar and others have pointed that out, and you are also saying the same. Let me. I see Jackie from the ILO here, and I've seen, Jackie, that you've also put in a comment in the chat box. You shared a link to a study. Would you like to come in here and comment on the conversation on what you're hearing, Jackie? Okay. Let me. All right. Let me move on. Let me move on then. Okay. Let me see. I see. I also see Vani in the call, and Vani, you've seen a lot of work around this as well, and I know that in the Middle East office of the ILO that we are together in the kind of group. Uh, there is some discussion around this as well. What is your take on this as we as the skills agenda has become bigger and bigger with. Oh, sorry. I see host Jackie wanted to speak. Says she's saying sorry. It says host not allowing to unmute. Rakesh Sada, can you
No, no,
unmute Jackie
just
Pollack?
1 minute, just 1 minute.
It's in the name. You will see Jackie ILO.
Okay, Jackie.
You want me to go?
Yes, yes, yes. Done it. Done.
Okay, let's go with Jackie and then we go with Wani. Go, Jackie.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, Jackie, go ahead. Great to hear you.
So hello, everybody. So just on that link I sent, we did a study last year on skills of returned migrants. I mean, there was nothing huge, I guess, in it. Obvious that the skills weren't recognized when people returned. But I think one of the things that really shocked people here was how much the migrants recognized that they'd learned other skills, like not vocational skills, but they'd learned like management skills, problem solving, people management. And those are not really often counted as skills that migrants are expected to learn or have. But for the skills within their work, they didn't really recognize them at all. And I think that's also about how jobs are looked at. I mean, it's great to hear from everyone here talking about domestic workers, but in Myanmar, really domestic workers' skills are not, domestic workers are not recognized as having any skills. They're right at the bottom of the pack, totally stigmatized. So if you ask a domestic worker, do you have skills? Do you need skills? They'll say no, because everybody says it's a completely unskilled job. So I think there's also that level of looking at who decides what is a skill, and how do you promote that skill? How do you ensure that people have it? And I think we have supported an organization to do 5-week trainings with domestic workers to work in Myanmar. And you see from the beginning to the end of that course how, as other people have said, it's not just the actual skills, it's the whole sense of dignity, of empowerment, of being able to know that you have rights and to try and negotiate. And of course, it's an issue of then they have a very limited market, because in many ways they're way above the market that's available. That employers aren't going to suddenly raise their wages or increase the conditions. But those workers in a small number have been trying to do that, and do bypass employers who won't increase their salaries. So yeah, I think I agree that there's a lot of ad hoc skills trainings going on which don't really lead anywhere. But I think that migrants having the choice and access to skills is really important, not just because of the vocational skills, but because of dignity and empowerment.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you for that. And I think it's great that you have said that. And I think that is what I've been trying to trying to say in this, from the start, I think is as well. I think we've got to deconstruct this whole skills discourse in the way that Jackie has just done, and Salar has said, and Lakshman has said, and Maria has said, is that we've got to go beyond this one moment in which a certificate is given as against that whole experience of the migrant worker in a country of destination and even upon return. What is that experience kind of thing, and how does skills configure in that experience is how we need to liquidate this discussion. Otherwise, this compartmentalized way of saying get this and this changes this is not going to work. It looks good on paper, but I think there are challenges there. Let me come to Wani. Wani, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think certification is quite limiting. As Jackie pointed out, the sociocultural skills, the soft skills that they gain over years is obviously not being recognized, which is why something that Salar said really stood out. You work for 13 years, you go back, you find no opportunities, you come back here, but you're not always coming back to a better job or to a better salary, even in the destination country. You find that that the increments in salary and job roles are not what it should be. You'd be in the same position for 15, 20 years, even if you change jobs. So we need to start looking at our companies looking for skills in non-technical jobs. Is that going to work? What kind of skills do they really put value on soft skills? We really need to start questioning that and not really play into certification alone. The second thing about domestic work is, of course, there's this fantastic report that Marie Jose had done for Abu Dhabi Dialogue, I think, which looked at the care industry, where the hope is that domestic work is not treated as just an unskilled work, where we are going to see it being divided into different skill set, be it elderly care or child care. But you're not seeing that that demand in destination countries. In Qatar, when the Nanny Academy was set up, that was set up not as domestic work, but as a governess role. And they were recruiting workers directly to be trained and to receive the certification. But that was a very tiny percentage, and it was a niche, it was a luxury. So in general, domestic work, for instance, what does skilling mean for that? In Ethiopia, you need 240 hours, I think, in order to be able to migrate as a domestic worker. But the 240 hours doesn't really give them any rights-based skill either. So I think there has to be a complete overhaul of what origin countries do in terms of skilling and what destination countries do in terms of recognizing it.
Thank you. Exactly, and again, thank you for reinforcing. I think this whole notion of deconstructing the way I think skills is being looked at today within global discourse and within regional processes, and particularly with countries of origin and destination. And Dr. Tulika Gaur, I see you have made another comment there that is very pertinent to the discussion. Would you like to make that comment? Dr. Gaur? Sada, can you see Dr. Tulika Gaur?
Yes, yes, I'm
Not able to unmute.
1 minute.
Have you found it?
Yes.
Go ahead, doctor. Yeah?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes. Very good evening to everybody. My comment on this entire discourse that is being set up is, where do we exactly place the responsibility of training or giving skills to various migrants? And how do we enforce that kind of responsibility, whether it has to be in the sending country or the receiving country itself? Whereas when the receiving country, if we see the perspective towards the migrants or towards the labor force that they are having there, it is because their own citizens or because their own people are not doing that job, and they are borrowing that kind of which we say as a non-skill, but they are borrowing that kind of labor from or they are outsourcing that kind of labor. So what kind of responsibility do we see here, where do we place the responsibility of training the migrants, and how do we make sure that the migrants will be able to support that kind of training, or support the cost of that kind of training or expertise that is there to help them? Thank you.
And thank you for that, because this is another thing that I have seen in countries of origin already, that with this whole mantra of skills now, that skills has become one more cost for migrant workers. It's become one more cost that migrant workers have to bear.
Yes.
And the question is, again, when you put it in the context of what others have just said, then you begin to realize that it's another burden that is put on the migrant workers, but does it deliver? That is the big question. I see Dr. Raj as well on the call. Raj, do you want to come in and say something at this point? And then after that, I will ask Angie and Henry before I go back to the panel. Angie and Henry, be ready. But Raj, I saw you Are you still there? Is Dr. Raj still around?
Just I'm unmuting. It's done.
Go ahead, Raj. You want to weigh in on the conversation? No? I don't see.
No, I
No,
made her unmute, but
she's
Okay,
not.
all right. Is it better
Oh,
now?
yes, that's
Can you
right.
hear me?
We hear you.
Yeah.
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead, Raj.
Yeah, I think we need to have this discourse on unpacking what we understand by skilling or giving skills to migrants. Because this is not only responding to what is needed in the host country, which is not the case always, because it is one way to enter a host country. For example, in Canada, Australia, and England, where you have point system. So if you have certain skills, you qualify to enter the country, but that doesn't mean you get the job that you are trained for. So I think that's another aspect of the skilling or the training. So training is not always used. Training is a way to gain entry into the country. But as regards the wider sense, and I like that the wider definition of what is skilling is not just the skill per se, it is what happens to the conditions of work, what happens to the whole package, the leave, the pension, the care, and a whole lot. So it's not just responding that now they need so many cooks, so we provide cooks or elderly care people. But what is the wider part of that? And I think this discourse should really be taken very seriously. And I'm glad, William, that you have brought this or unpacked or tried to unpack, that we are not just looking at the skills, but we are looking at the whole gamut, like the ILO thing, the labor rights, the human rights, the conditions of service, the type of job, and the prospects of migrating to further migrate or to get back home and to do something more meaningful. So it has much wider connotation than just giving skills to a host country that is lacking certain kind of labor skills. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you for that. And yes, you're right. And Sita as well put it in the comment earlier that it's largely being used as a point of entry. And I see it also, therefore, as a point of containing the flows kind of thing, this fear that migrants will invade our borders kind of thing. How do you contain the flow? From a marriage migration perspective, you put an extra barrier, and that is the skill barrier. So it becomes a point of entry, but not necessary to the job that you want. That's a good point. That's a good point there. So I think it's good that we are looking into these things and trying to see how to deconstruct or look into what more is beyond in this. Let me come to Angie. Angie, you do a lot of work. Your organization CMA has done a lot of work on exploitation of Filipino migrant workers abroad and things like that. How do you see this whole question of skills? The people that we see in the exploitative being exploited, is it because of lack of skills, or is there more to this discourse? Angie Tan? Sada, you'll have to unmute Angie Tan.
yes. Just done.
Did you done? Angie, you want to come in? Then Sada, look for Henry after that. I will call in Henry after Angie. Angie, you want to come in?
Hi, hello. Good evening from Manila. Well, based on our experience, let me just share with you first the research, the study that we just did just last year, last quarter of the year. This is the skills matching of the overseas Filipino workers. And out of 300 respondents, majority says that although they acquired skills that they can use to study in the Philippines, but they opt to still go abroad due to lack of opportunities in the country. I think that is one of the factors also for overseas Filipino workers to choose to still work outside even though they acquired it. And just to highlight some of the recommendations that was um, um, made during that in the study, it's the collaboration and coordination of government agencies or the shareholder. It says here that um, the respondents or the OFWs who responded to the study have plethora of skills that they have acquired from their years of working abroad. The government should look into the skills accreditation program and the institutionalization of lifelong learning programs, as well as programs to upgrade and expand these acquired skills, or in short, how they can use these acquired skills or these skills that they acquire during their work abroad or um, to in order to use this or to took advantage of the skills that they acquired and use this once they go back to the Philippines. But again, we will go back to the number one response of the respondents that there's no opportunity in the Philippines. And and to answer your question, William, based on our experiences going into different communities, conducting trainings, we see that skills or knowledge conducting training, these are very, very important for migrant workers to protect themselves, to put forward or to fight for their rights. To give you a concrete example, there's this domestic workers who experience abuse, but since she attended the training that tackles her basic right as a migrant worker, she was able to look for a right channel to help her in order to get out of that abusive situation. I think that is very important. And the problem is, I think if I may also add to the recommendation, I think outside skills, it is very important also to include the basic rights of migrant workers before they go abroad. Aside from focusing on the skills that they should acquire in order to be prepared for their work abroad, it is also good to note or also good to include in the curriculum that they are undergoing their basic rights as migrant workers. Do they have rights, or they should just accept that double standards are really existing in the country of origin, that since they are migrant workers, they are different from the citizens who are also working in the country. So I think that would help, training them, equipping them with the rights would help them to be not just an effective worker, but also to fight for their right as human, working in a different country. There.
Thank you, Angie, for that, and I agree, and that's what a little while ago, again, Jackie, Awani have mentioned this as well. Runage said this at the beginning as well. I think we've got to expand our understanding of what we mean by skills, and particularly the way it is being constructed today in discourse. Let me come to Henry. Henry, you have been the coordinator of Lawyers Beyond Borders, and Salar talked about legal knowledge kind of things, skills, legal training, and things like that. What is your experience? What are your thoughts on this? Is this part of the gamut of knowledge and skills and learning that migrants must have, or this is something also that we need to see how to develop? Henry? Sada, Henry, I think you're.
Yes, yes.
Yes, go ahead, Henry. You're very soft. Like you're very far from your mic. Can you come a little closer?
Oh, I have my, yeah, okay. Can you hear me now? No.
Yes, go ahead. It's soft still, but a little louder than soft.
Okay, okay. Let's increase the volume, yes. Well, are you're referring to legal skills or skills in general, William?
I'm talking about legal skills, something that Salar said, and then others have subsequently said, to be able to negotiate one's rights and navigate.
Well, yes, that's part of the framework of knowledge and skills that migrant workers should have in navigating the legal frameworks in different countries. No? So it is important that before the migrant worker leaves the country, he or she has a better understanding of what are the legal procedures, legal requirements, and legal standards that are in the country of destination. So as much as possible, this information should be given to the migrant worker or prospective migrant worker before he or she leaves the country of origin. No? So we have the pre-employment, the pre-departure programs, and on site there's the post-arrival orientation programs, and there are a lot of education or materials that on legal matters that can be developed through social media or to the internet. No? So it is completely important. As I remember before, even on but going beyond the legal skills requirement, when we talk about skills before at the start of in the late 70s or early 80s, when it was the boom of the Middle East, one worry of the Philippines and countries of origin is skills draining or the skilling. No? So you would see then so many workers from the PLDT or the communist linemen going to the Middle East, and the capability of the local companies will be reduced because most of their skills whom they trained will be working overseas. No, so before they used to measure this, since their education and training is done in the country of origin, what is the economic impact? Recently, another issue on skills that came to fore in the Philippines is the issue of critical skills. In the issue of doctors and nurses in this COVID period, no, does the state has the authority to hinder or reduce the deployment based on critical skills needed? No, because it's needed in the Philippines. Is the government justified in banning, imposing a temporary ban on the deployment of doctors and nurses to other countries? No? So these are the types of skills question. No? Even on the individual levels, you will see that even before, a lot of those who work overseas as domestic workers, many are teachers in the Philippines, but they were forced to work as domestic helpers abroad because of better pay at that time. No? So even on the individual level, you can talk about skills on the skilling even on the individual level. No? So then if we go to the educational system, you will see that the courses that are being offered in the country of origin, like in the Philippines, are also heavily influenced by the demand for labor internationally. No? So if there's a big demand for engineers abroad, then so many courses for engineers will open, or for nurses. And then when it crashed, then you will have so many unemployed engineers or unemployed nurses. So it goes an up and down pattern following the demand abroad for skills. No? So one question is, what's the impact on the local economy if that's the way the educational system is being directed in terms of supply and demand? No? So there are so many aspects when we talk about skills that yes, it is so important, not only on legal skills, but the overall, it can be viewed in so many aspects. And I believe, I agree that all these aspects of skills on how to look at it should be studied further, no? In order for the further protection of the rights of migrant workers and the elevation of their capacities and skills. No? And even if we look at the migrant workers who are returning home, they could have acquired better skills or upgraded skills abroad, but how can it be used? If there is no proper way of matching when they come home to the country of origin.
And that brings back to the point that Angie just said, that and from the most recent study of CMA, that many migrant workers left the Philippines largely because they felt that there's no place for their skills in the country, or at least would not give them decent employment, and so they go out. And now you are saying when they come back, if they cannot find decent employment, then we have a challenge. But now let me go back to the panel as we come to our last closing session round kind of thing. And I'll go back to the panel from reverse, if that's okay. And I'll come back to you, starting with you, Salar, with regard to some of the things that you have said. There's been good feedback on what you said in the conversation that we've had since on the flow. What's going through your head at the moment from those comments, or is there anything that you want to build on? Salar.
Yeah. So, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things I wanted to respond to is that someone mentioned in the comments as well, and the discussion was also held here, which said that the workers have to pay for the certificates and the training, and it's a burden on them, if I heard it correctly. And from what I remember, and I was trying to look for that specific research so I could share it with everybody, that social learning has shown an increase in productivity of workers in a company, and also for professional development and skills training has led to an improvement in the productivity of the overall business. So as advocates for rights, the narrative can be changed to that it is economically viable for the private companies to train their workers rather than workers paying for those trainings. And research has shown these things. When it comes down to just the closing remarks, I'm glad that there was a lot of response to this lifelong learning and people agreeing to the importance of the soft skills and not just the technical skills. And this is what I was aiming to point out as well, that whenever someone says skills, the definition of skills is always tend to be very technical, but that is not the case with the advancement in technology. And there was a mention of MOOCs as well, and how Tesla is using MOOCs for learning. The idea should be of creating lifelong learners, people who can learn on their own and develop themselves as human beings to further, fulfill the SDGs of good quality education, overall improving their health and well-being. And those are the comments that I read in the chat as well, that someone mentioned about the workers should be trained on their physical health. So all of these things are combined. It's very difficult to separate these skills. So these are my closing remarks, and thank you so much for everybody who was here.
Thanks a lot for that, and I agree with you. I think this notion of lifelong learning, this has been around for some time with UNESCO and things like that. But I'm glad that you're beginning to look at it in the context of migrant workers and seeing it in that frame of how migrant workers negotiate their life as migrant workers from the time of deployment to the time that they return. Let me come to you, Maria. What have you been hearing in this conversation, and how does the conversation sit with you now?
Oh, yeah. I just have a realization that I did not go into the real competency-based framework that we are doing. So really for us, skilling is empowering people. Skilling is providing the competencies that a person needs to work. And those competencies include not just the technical skills, but also the soft skills, the 21st century skills that were mentioned, the ICT, critical thinking, problem-solving skills, all of those are there. And in our competency-based framework and in our qualifications development, it includes also the other variables that are needed by a worker. So for instance, you're talking about basic rights. If those knowledge or other information that needs to be taught to the worker, then that should have been included. And we work with, in our quality assured framework, we work with employers, with industries who will need the skills. So in this case, that's why we've been also working with PASE, because they would know what requires what is required of the domestic worker, to be very specific about the domestic worker and even other workers, because PASEI sends also other types of workers. And then the whole quality assured TVET framework that we have, this is underlined by the principles of lifelong learning, just to, as Salar has been emphasizing. Yes, we are under that principle. That's why we have short courses that can be learned by people from different types of walks of life and different types of workers, and also the recognition of prior learning. So that certification process that we do also employs that principle of recognition of prior learning. People don't have to go through formal training, but when they learn skills and competencies from work and from other sources, from online learning at their own pace, at their own skills, then that's how we employ also our recognition of prior learning. So also those who have gone abroad and have acquired skills from abroad, we do that also, and we try as much as possible to offer them other opportunities here. But of course, it's the lure always of the higher pay that brings them back to being migrant workers. So I think that's, and we have, I've taken that point that we need to conduct a study, because for us, all these good things that we hear from people that we have assisted are already good for us, but documenting them is another thing. So that is one takeaway, that we have to conduct that study. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, and it would be really great to see how, when that study is there, how you could share it with us, in the sense of we could see how this, because I think it is studies like that that will make a difference for us to know how much we are shifting the indicator of empowerment for migrant worker, or rights and dignity for migrant worker, from those who are, let us say, right at the bottom kind of thing, unrecognized for the skill sets they have, domestic workers, to whatever classifications are there within the low wage sector. But it would be really interesting to see how that happens. Let me come to Raquel. Raquel, as the president of the largest recruitment network in the Philippines, as you listen to this conversation today, and as you listen to the whole question of lifelong learning and skills and soft skills and things like that, I know a lot of the recruitment agencies are constantly in touch from the Philippines with the migrant workers that they have deployed. Is the social media process of continual engagement with deployed migrant workers, could that be an avenue for recruiters to continue doing that training around lifelong learning skills? Raquel?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Well, that will be a very important aspect, because right now, the OFWs, or the overseas Philippine workers, are computer literates already. There's no one who doesn't know how to use the Facebook. So it will be a big contribution if they will it will be enhanced more on ICT education. So when they come back, then there is an additional knowledge, rather than just using it a mere Facebook. And then I agree on the financial literacy, which is very important, because they have to know how to manage their finances or their salary, because that's what they lack right now. And also, in training, it should not only the skills, but also like basic knowledge on legal matters, so that they can be empowered more, not only on the skills that they have, or the skills that they will be trained. And also, I agree on that education or training or courses are driven by the demand of the host country. That's why I mentioned that it's very important that we, the recruiters, should be in touch with the government or employers in host countries where we deploy, so that there will be no mismatching. That there should be a match on their need and also our supply. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raquel, and I agree with you. I have seen some of the work of PERSEI, and I know at least some of the recruiters within the Philippines context, and I know that there is an active kind of engagement even post deployment by the recruiter with with the overseas Filipino worker, and I think this might be worth considering from this conversation as how can that ongoing communication with the OFW, with the migrant worker, be a way of transmitting, learning, exchanging, enhancing some of the others, so what are called soft skills, IT skills, information
Tuesday.
technology, computer, and things like that. How could legal skills and all, how could all this be part of that ongoing learning process? So it's not a question of just deploy skill certification, deployment, okay, finished, one or two process done, but it becomes part of a whole different kind of atmosphere, kind of thing, environment. Basically, I think it will be important to see how recruiters play that role and not just see this as use the skill, and because I know it is currently being done by some in some parts of the world where it is just another tick box thing that we have to get in order to ensure deployment. But thank you, Raquel, for that. Let me come back to you, Runage, for what are your thoughts on this? And as you've heard the conversation, where are you now? Runage, can you unmute?
Yes,
Yes.
I agree with Maria that she said the importance of RPL aspect. So when the migrant worker returns with some kind of gained skills, to improved skills, that should be assessed here, and proper certification must be made, so that mechanism should be there in all sending countries. I mean, then not only the mechanism is placed, but the migrant worker himself or herself should be educated enough on the aspect and ask them to bring proper evidence to prove that the capacity or the capability that they have gained in these foreign countries, and then try to claim the certificate or the assessment criteria pass. So that is important as far as this RPL concern. And also, I can remember that Raquel and Dr. Tulika mentioned about some kind of arrangements. Dr. Tulika mentioned that kind of a misunderstanding between the sending and receiving countries on the aspect of skills of migrant worker. That is correct. That situation is there. To how we overcome that kind of situation is important to concentrate on in this kind of discussion. And also, Raquel said about minimum wage that is practiced by Philippines government with regard to migrant workers. But instead of minimum wage, I would like to have a country I would like to have a country-based kind of wage schemes because we know that different countries have different formalities of thinking and different formalities of training. But instead, if we can have kind of a uniform system in gauging or in assessing salaries instead of minimum wages, that is much important as far as the skills are concerned. And the other thing is developing regional standards and guidelines for the recognition of skills and qualifications of migrant workers must be improved, because that kind of system is there. The gaps, as mentioned by Dr. Tulika, can be minimized. So we know the requirement of that country, the destination country, and we can then adjust sending countries workers or the skills of sending country workers accordingly. So that mutual understanding must be there. Because of that, we are promoting this mutual MOUs for the BLA. So even if we are going to do it at regional level, then we can use the regional conferences or the RCP levels to promote this kind of aspect. So these points I have to mention. conclusion of my observations as far as the observations made by other participants. Thank you, William.
Thank you, Ronagi. I think you've raised a very important point. We have not touched upon this so much in the discussion, but it would maybe it's a good point that you have raised about this thing between country of origin and country of destination in this recognition of skills. I think this is a discourse in itself that has not been unpacked, and I think it's a discourse on recognition, respect of interdependency. The host countries need to also recognize that these skills that are coming into their market are skills that are helping into the development of their countries, kind of thing. So that it's still a lopsided, in a certain sense, a discourse which is driven by the market but not necessarily driven by a real concept of partnership, of cooperation, and even, I would say, of interdependence. But I think this is where the skills discourse needs to also go, and not only, like Raj said, as a bill or as a certificate for entry, but it should also be seen as a partnership of interdependence between states. But thank you for raising that point of respect between countries of origin and destination. Finally, Ronnie, coming to you now. You started off this conversation and you discussed and you said that it was very important to have this, and Nepal and Helvitas are involved with the SAMI project in a lot of skilling. Where are you now after listening to this conversation? How do you think about some of the things that have been said about the need for going beyond the kind of certification programs and seeing even skill within a much bigger environment of continuous learning?
Thank you, William. Yeah, I would like to build on that after hearing all this discussion. To better protection of migrant worker in terms of skilling, we need whole of government approach and whole of society approach, because one organization, one country, or one stakeholder cannot bring much changes. We need to come together for advancement of skills, training, certification, and recognition. And I would like to highlight also at the grassroots level, there is a need for massive information on advantages of skills training, because there is very less interest of migrant workers in skills training, and having massive awareness program makes them realize that skills training can help them for the better bargaining and better protection. And in terms of gender perspective, I would like to add that it is in the country of origin, women migration is not viewed as good thing. Women migration is viewed as a bad thing. So women are approaching skills training, and frequent ban on women and age bar on women are hampering them to come to the skills training. So such restrictive policies has to be also avoided when we want gender friendly work environment and access to skills training for both men and women. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for pointing out this, particularly in the context of women, of how policies around migration are crafted that actually bar women from coming forward. I think this is a very important point. So the whole question of empowerment then gets even more complex, or even more a challenge for migrant workers. Look, everybody, it's now past 2 minutes, the hour when we should conclude. So I bring this conversation to a conclusion for today, to say it's been a very important conversation. Thank you for all those who have contributed to it, especially that the fact that we have tried to, in this conversation today, look at how to go beyond the notion of skills as a certification program that is a point of entry, as Raj would have said, has said, to a destination country. Skills is much, much more than that, and skills goes across a whole parameter of the whole landscape of a migrant worker's existence in terms of a lifelong experience. So thank you for unpacking it like that for us, and thank you for the thoughts that were in the chat box as well. So many questions about empowerment. Does it lead to recovery of wages and non-payment of wages? For those who are wondering, if you see my background, it is not the normal background that I've used for the last 17 webinars. We have launched a campaign, Justice for Wage Theft, and it is about some of the questions that were in the chat box. It is about how do you empower migrants so that they can get what is due to them. For those who have not had a chance to look at it, I will encourage you, go to the website justiceforwagetheft.org, and you'll get more information and see how you can contribute to it. Thank you, everybody. I see one more comment from Angie and Paddy towards the end to say post-COVID, the whole skill discourse will still go even further and will change kind of thing because of the imposition that COVID has put on mobility. So there will be a whole new set of skills that we need to look at. So this is going to be a live wire conversation. Let's hope we can keep it like that, a live wire conversation, which actually has an impact on the life of migrant workers in a way that they are empowered, in a way that it acts as the transformation that migration, or at least the dream of migration, is for many. Thank you all. It has been a meaningful conversation for me. Thank you for the comments, and thank you for being with us. We see you next Tuesday for the GCM Objective 19, and Objective 19 is on diaspora engagement. So thank you all for joining. See you next. Thank you to the co-organizers, GRFTD, CCRM, and the Action Committee. Thank you to the panelists for your valuable time and for starting off this discussion and concluding it. Thank you so much. Good luck.